Everybody, come, come, whoever you are, worshiper, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Group one. Come, come, whoever you are. Come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Come, yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are. Come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Dwight Fish, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of this congregation. Welcome to you all. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Elkhart is a welcoming community, encouraging religious freedom, nurturing individual spiritual and ethical growth, celebrating diversity, and promoting a just and sustainable world. If you would like to learn more about this fellowship, please look at our website at uufe.org and join us after the service for our coffee hour. That's through the picture gallery in our gathering space. For the listening enjoyment of all, we ask you at this time to please turn off all your cell phones and pagers. I love that part of it, pagers. They're so old-fashioned, so 90s. Also, if you need hearing support, please ask for help at the sound desk. And my wife says, what? Thank you. We've got a few announcements. After the service today, please help us by taking up the chairs and stacking against the wall so our cleaning service may vacuum this area. Also, Norm Anderson just came in a few days ago and cleaned the gathering space. It's very neat and tidy. So if you happen to spill any food or crumbs on the, just lick them up so we can keep the carpets fresh and nice. But it does look quite nice, and Norm is always so gracious, and he's always volunteering to help do that kind of work. It's very nice. Joan Claiborne is moving forward with a plan outlined by her urologist. If you haven't heard, she has bladder cancer and will have surgery tomorrow. She's in the back, and we love you dearly. Ken and Joan will keep everyone up to date as this treatment progresses. They send love to you all and appreciate your care and concern. A small group has planned to return to walks done during the pandemic. The first is meeting today at 12:30 at Goshen Brewing to walk the Mill Race Trail. That sounds like a lot of fun. It's going to be a beautiful day. UUFE Euchre returns on Saturday, the 14th of October at 4 p.m. and see Mary Adams for details. And I don't think Mary's here, but just so you know, let's gear up. Euchre, baby, Euchre. I'm very competitive when it comes to euchre, right, Ray? Yes. Mary Perrin. Mary Perrin has a heart that she'd like us all to pass and bless with whatever message you like. And we're going to move it through our congregation and give it to Joan at the end of our blessing pass. So peace to you. Have a great day. I've got to go do a political thing. I'm sorry. Love you all.
okay?
I had it already.
Well, I'll get started, and if he gets the picture up, fine. I'm Jim Barnes. I'm a physician that was retired from the Elkhart Clinic. In 1975, while I was in my last year of obligation to the Army, I went to an infectious disease meeting in Memphis, Tennessee, and I sat next to a Dr. Jack Ivey, who was both a founder of the Elkhart Clinic and a founder of UUFE. It's a big part of why I'm here, but then part of the reason I'm interested in infectious disease was then and have all my life is due to my grandfather. That's him there. Alan Leslie Barnes. In the fall of 1918, he was a school teacher and came down with a flu-like illness. He was a farmer that had crops in his field. He went, as soon as he felt a little better, he went out and tried to get his crops in the field and then got sick with pneumonia and died on December the 8th of 1918 at the age of 46, leaving a 4-year-old son who was not even allowed to attend his father's funeral because obviously they knew that it was an infection and you had to stay away from it. A month later, Frank Linhart was a clinical manager at Westinghouse factory near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and developed flu and died a few days later of the flu. He died on the 15th of January 1919, leaving 2 small children, including a 2-year-old. Both my father at 4 and my father-in-law at 2 ended up being raised by their widowed mothers. Now, it was good that they had some family support, but it was quite a struggle to have died of the infection in 1918. My grandfather actually had a brother in medical school at the time, at IU Medical School, which is where I graduated from. And I'm sure that part of the family lore of his going back to work too soon contributing to his death was, due to to his brother that was in medical school. In 1918, flu was clearly an infectious disease, but they didn't even know whether it was a bacteria or a virus or just what it was. It wasn't until 1945 until a flu vaccine was widely available. But during the flu of 1918, masks, good hygiene, avoiding others while you're ill, good nutrition, all helped. But the real thing that helps more than anything else today is to be vaccinated. The single most effective way to prevent death due to either COVID or the flu is to get vaccinated, and I want to encourage everybody to get vaccinated. I have my vaccinations for both scheduled for tomorrow. Thank you.
We ring the gong 3 times. Once for those who came before us and made a place for us. Once for those who are here now. And once for those who will follow us and build on the dream. Our chalice lighting today is written by Adam Slate, who is a candidate for UU ministry, and it is entitled "Honoring Our Common Connection and Our Uniqueness." We gather this morning as one community, a community united by common ideals: love, justice, diversity, freedom, mutual care, equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual, each one of us with our own story, needs, strengths, and faults. We light our chalice today honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives within each of us. Please join me in reciting our unison covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Our offering today is going to support solely the UUFE Sustainability Fund, which we use to help cover emergencies, repairs, special needs for our building and grounds. Please give generously. Thank you. I have a special reading for today because this is a special Sunday where members of ours are going to share their stories. And I thought this would be very appropriate. It's written by Reverend Gretchen Haley, and it has been written specifically to be modified for the season and times, and I have done so. It is entitled, God Runs Late for Church. Today, God is running late, trying to find their seat, scanning the room for someone they know or someone they don't. God's feeling evangelical, but not in a judgy way. Mysterious, but not manipulative. God can't stop thinking about the James Webb Telescope and the possibility that time is not linear, which God already knows from the never-ending urgency of faraway elections and from Costco featuring Christmas decorations in September. God is tired of grief and white supremacy and the warming of the oceans. God is tired of the dictator that invaded Ukraine and all other totalitarian regimes. God wonders. And of course, we're all like, no kidding, God, can't you do something about that? But God's hearing aid batteries ran out, and they haven't had time to order more. Or that's what they say when asked, and can hear the question, but really, they can only do so much. But it's just not enough. And really, God just wants to be present, stop worrying about everything, and sing, breathe, laugh. We got you, God, we say. We'll settle in, and we'll be present, and we'll sing. We'll tell our experiences and breathe deep. We'll remember ourselves and offer whole galaxies of gratitude for all this beauty, for bright blooming mums and full apple trees, zucchini bread, and Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, for parking lot planting and blessing bags for the homeless. You are safe here, God. Come, let us worship together. So we have 3 speakers for today. And our first speaker is Art Beutler. And Art is the catalyst and inspiration for today's service with some information he wants to share. And all of our speakers are going to share stories from the heart and the soul, their experiences of the divine. So I'd like to start by welcoming Art up here to the pulpit.
Thank you, Chuck, for inviting me here to my church. Obviously, there are very many faces that I don't know, but there's very many that I do, and I remember fondly what we did earlier in a different building many years ago, and I really feel pleasured and honored, and I would like to read to you the story that I sent to the staff here at church, and they in turn invited me. So I say, greetings to you all. I am Art Beutler, and a proud member of this dear church for many years now. Although I no longer come here often because it is a long walk from Goshen to here and back. My dear wife Beverly, right here, also attends with me, and we still have many good friends here. I especially want to thank Chuck Bauer and our managing staff for inviting me to talk about my religious life and my experiences as a member of this UU church. I should say that I have been writing my own life story for a long time now on a weekly basis, and I am now at my 7th volume and about page 950. I won't bother to read all that. But I also love to use my old camera, which I often carry with me, and results in great pictures filling at least half of each page. Many of you know my dear wife Beverly, whom I was fortunate enough to find after I lost Margie. She had a similar experience, Beverly had a similar experience in losing her first husband also, and who died, and she is with me now. So how did I leave the Lutheran Church and find the UU Church so many years ago? I read the following, especially for those of you who know, maybe, who know Margie, my first wife, and I loved her so dearly too. So, I'll show you the book one of the books that I have put all these writings and pictures into. And this is volume number 6, and I'm now on volume number 7. So, how do we feel about living here at Evergreen Place? Let me see, is that what I wanted to read first? I guess, oh no. I am especially intrigued by my Unitarian friends and your stories, since many of you have Christian roots as I did, and I know you have some interesting stories to tell. My first exposure to the Unitarian Church began in Lexington, Kentucky, where my wife Margie and I were living. We were faithful members of Faith Lutheran Church. We had both been born and raised in the Lutheran faith. One Sunday morning, Marge was too sick to go to church, and I had seen a different church in our vicinity which had aroused my interest, since I knew nothing about the Unitarians except that I had heard they were very liberal. So I went there and was rather impressed, especially when a young man rose to speak during share time. He surprised me when he said how much he loved this church, since he was homosexual and he had been so welcomed there. That is something I would not have expected to hear in a Christian church at that time, when mores were so rigid. That was the spark that eventually started me on a whole new quest. When Margie was diagnosed with Lewy body, a form of Alzheimer's disease, at my daughter's urging, we decided to move to Goshen to be near her and her family. It was a good move, and Diane and Tim helped us a great deal as Margie's condition worsened despite her health care service in 3 different care facilities. She finally passed in her own bed at our home in Springbrook, Goshen, with me, Diane, and Dave at her side. Dave had driven all day and night from Maine when he heard that her passing was imminent. And I think he had been with us less than an hour as she lay seemingly unconscious in her bed, breathing with great difficulty, although she was unable to talk and her eyes remained closed. Diane suggested that I read the 23rd Psalm to her. I did, and I don't know if one can describe a death as a beautiful experience, but we 3 were convinced that she was holding on and waiting for Dave to arrive. And then the last words she heard were, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, for thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." I just finished the reading, and within seconds, her labored breathing came to a halt as her blessed soul passed so peacefully off to God's care. Hollywood could not have enacted a better passing than that. I know some of you knew her, and I definitely wanted to read that section for that reason. Now, the main part of my story is as follows, taken from one of my journals. So how do we feel about living here at Evergreen Place? I will admit that it's just the place where I want to spend my final days on earth. I feel that Bev sees it that way also. Yes, we do miss the travel times of the past, and we love to recall all those good memories of times past with our families, many of whom have now gone on to greener pastures. Only my sister and Ollie and I now remain of the 7 children in the Adolph and Elvina Beutler family. I don't really fear my own passing, since I do believe that we all will meet again in heaven. But I still want to remain here with Beverly as long as possible. But if I ever become a burden, please take me, Lord. Sure, I was born into the Lutheran Christian faith, but eventually changed to the more liberal Unitarian Universal Church, which even accepts atheists into their fold. That was after I had read the Bible and had come to believe that a loving God could not have approved of every word in it. For instance, why would a loving God have had his so-called son sacrificed upon the cross to prove his love for us? That's not the only reason why I now call myself an agnostic Christian, even though there really is no such a label. Yes, it's mainly because all those pulses that I so frequently feel in my head which cause me to believe that yes, there really has to be a spiritual being which may be God. That is guiding me in the path that my conscience says I must follow. It is a path that now finally makes sense to me, and I doubt that any human being now will ever convince me that it leads to hell rather than to heaven. What surprises me is that no one, not even my wife, ever has questioned me about these mysterious pulse messages that I receive all the time now. I am somewhat reluctant to write about this. I suspect that everyone must feel that I'm just imagining it. But please believe me, this is definitely coming from a spiritual source. I should mention that recently at one time at night I was awakened by a multiple rapid pulsing applause, which so surprised me. But it was a pleasant surprise since I do daily receive those. Not en masse, but not en masse. So I hesitate to write about this, and I have given it a lot of thought because I certainly don't ever want to disrupt anyone's strong religious faith. Religious leaders would certainly condemn the signals as coming from the devil. If it were the devil, he has never responded to my questions. I have mentally asked many questions as to the true origin of the responses, and the responses have always confirmed that they come from my deceased family members or from God himself. Also, in another matter, how about the death of Jesus? How could a loving God claim that his own precious son was sacrificed upon the cross as a symbol of forgiveness for our sins? I just cannot believe that. So this is my story. Is it true or false? This most likely will not convince you good Christians, but to me, it has actually convinced me more than any minister or the Bible. And there really is a loving God in heaven to which all good people are destined to go. While most of the Bible and our church's teachings are good and true, I no longer believe that everything we read in the Bible or hear in church is true. The signals I just received as I am writing this message were even longer than normal. May God bless us all. I am somewhat reluctant to write about the above because who would believe me? Why would God choose me to claim that the Bible is in error about the reason for the sacrifice of his son as payment for the sins of mankind? Am I missing something here? Yet it does not surprise me that no clergyman or woman would ever admit that any word in the Bible could possibly be wrong. Another reason that I question the Bible's authority is because I can't believe that a single entity called God could possibly know every thought and hear every word from every person, living or dead, in the world, and pass judgment as to whether to send that person to heaven or to hell. Yes, I have read the Bible, but that was many years ago, and I never questioned it at that time. Like most folks, I didn't know that I could. If it was not for these pulses that always get in my head since my first wife died, which I am certain came from her, assuring me that she was in heaven, I wouldn't be writing this message now. Even now, I can't help but think that if my thoughts truly came from God and the Bible, why would he choose such a lowly man as me to broadcast them to the world? Yet, why wouldn't he? No minister or priest would ever dare to broadcast to the world that the Bible is wrong in any claim or statement that it makes. So why wouldn't God choose the lowest of the low to reveal this message? If it wasn't for all, I would not, I think I read that, didn't I? So please bear in mind, this has made me a true believer of me in that there really is a heaven and good folks will eventually gather together there. Peace and love to you all, experienced by and written by Arthur Beutler, a lowly soul who had his doubts, but now believes in a real God and an afterlife in heaven. There's a P.S. I had originally decided to put this in my journal, not to put this in my journal because I did not want to pain my very Christian family or hurt anyone else's feelings regarding my religious convictions. But now I truly believe that God wants me to be his messenger. Anyone reading this message should be overjoyed that yes, there truly is a loving God, as well as their deceased family members awaiting them in heaven. I would be willing to talk to anyone who wants to talk to me about this matter. Now, I have another section here that I'd like to read to you also. Easter Sunday, this was written Easter Sunday. Who is this crazy man who says he can not only talk to God mentally, but God will answer back to him with yes or no pulses felt mentally in his head? Not only that, but he claims that he can even communicate with his deceased relatives, now in heaven, in the same manner, and they will answer back to him. That ought to give you some courage. Why that man would be me, Art Beutler, of course. I have often mentioned those strange pulses in previous pages, and you may have read and thought about that Art was losing his mind. Perhaps you are right, but read on. Last night, I was awakened from a sound sleep by an astounding pile of very rapid pulses, which obviously were coming from several outside generators at once. These definitely had to be coming from an outside source, as often in response to my unspoken mental questions, usually just a single pulse, but 2 or 3 in a row is not uncommon. You may check this out by simply compressing your facial muscles, which will generate the pulses of which I speak. But with me, they began to come without any self-imposed restriction in my facial muscles. But how, at other times when wide awake, could they occur, as they often do with me? And when you are asleep, have you ever been awakened by them? I have more than once that I mentally asked if they came from heaven or God, and they have confirmed that they were responding from God. Yes, all was beautiful in heaven. Well, just last night at around 2:15, I was suddenly awakened by an amazing series of rapid pulses which had come from more sources than a single originator. As I immediately turned to the clock and observed that the pulse tapered off and finally stopped after 5 or 6 minutes, it so surprised me that I was absolutely amazed and happy. This really confirmed my convictions that I could mentally talk to my past family members and even to God. I might even swear to you that this is true, but I'm not a swearing man. Up to that point, I had been convinced that I could communicate with my deceased relatives strictly through a gift from God. And quite frankly, I can honestly now more convinced than ever that this is true. I thank the Lord and those who are convinced that I was convinced were my deceased relatives. I wish I could have recorded the applause for you, dear folks. I later joined the Unitarian Universalist Church as they accepted all good folks regardless of prior religion or no religion at all. And I'm still supporting member of their nearest church at Elkhart. Bev has recently resigned because of distance, and I suspect to satisfy her family. She has never tried to dissuade me from going and always attends with me yet. We have 2 chaplains here in our 2 buildings that alternate buildings, and we most often attend church services here. But Bev is even our most popular pianist. One woman told her just yesterday that she even comes to hear her practice sessions, which she likes hearing her play so much. P.S. to my Unitarian church friends, the above was written at an earlier date, but I trust it will help answer anyone's reservations about the true source of my mysterious head pulses. So, I thank you for inviting me here, and it's great to see you good folks here, and I certainly will look forward to seeing you in heaven. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. What lovely experiences. Our next speaker is Shari Mellin, and Shari kind of dodged the question of how you'd like me to introduce you. She is a past board member, past board secretary, and I know Shari's going to share a very personal and intimate experience with us all. Welcome, Shari.
Thank you, Chuck. And Bev and Art, it's so nice to see you. We miss having you here, but we understand. Yeah, when Chuck first talked to me about sharing my experiences with God or the divine, I was really hesitant. The idea of God is such an intimate and personal experience for each person. I didn't want to sound like I was trying to talk anyone into believing what I believe. But for a reason I'll explain later, I decided to share my story. When I was a child, I went to the Congregational Church, and I went through confirmation there, and I learned my Bible verses, but I never really felt like I had a clear picture of God. I saw him as alternately kind of loving and then vengeful. If you were bad, you weren't going to go to heaven, and everyone is bad sometimes, especially when you're a kid. I think I also rebelled against the image of the domineering father figure, the all-male image that really seemed to exclude women from the spiritual life. And then I grew up and I left home and I sort of grew away from the church and away from God. I didn't go to church for 20 years after we moved to Elkhart in 1979. I just became more self-centered. I thought I didn't really need help from anyone. I relied on myself, and then when I wasn't enough, alcohol became my higher power. and then my problem. Many of you know that I'm an alcoholic. I've spoken about it before from this pulpit. I believe that my higher power, as I now recognize it, brought me to this church in 1999. That was when Cameo Victor invited me here. She said you were having a Bring a Friend Sunday, which I later found out wasn't true. But Cameo was bringing a friend. And I came, and I never stopped coming. I loved it here. I found acceptance, love, and support in defining my spirituality for myself. And looking back now, I realize that my higher power saved me from making some disastrous errors when I was drinking. So in 2002, I went to rehab for alcoholism. And at the intake, I remember crying, sobbing really, because I told the guy I didn't believe in God. And I thought that was a requirement for being there. And he said, no, that you can develop your own concept of a higher power, and but it just can't be you alone by yourself. So everything was going along well at rehab. I was actually thrilled to be there. I'd felt like I was drowning for a long time, and I guess I was glad that they finally insisted that I go. But then 4 days into it, my intestines stopped working, which is something that occasionally happens to alcoholics who have just suddenly stopped drinking. And so in kind of at nighttime, I was taken away to the hospital, and no one, including my husband, my roommate, the other women on my floor, knew where I was. I was just gone, and I have never felt so alone in my life. And I can remember saying out loud when they finally got me into the bed after all the other stuff, God, I don't know if you're there, but I need help. And the thing was, I felt some hope after that, and I felt like I wasn't alone. It was the feeling of God or a higher power that I connected with. So now that I'm a grown-up, I know that God is not an old man sitting on a throne in the clouds who decides who wins the war or who wins the football game or who gets cancer. But today I do know that there's a power greater than myself. I'm not going it alone, thank goodness. My vision of my higher power has come together over the last 21 years of my sobriety. I believe that there is a divine spark in every person. I believe that all life on earth is interconnected, and that there is a life force, a sacred energy that flows through and surrounds all life. This force is deeply spiritual and sort of beyond gender. It has both male and female characteristics. When I walk by the ocean, or I'm walking in a forest or on a mountain, being in nature always brings me a sense of peace. And when I look out on all of you, seeing the lovely faces of my friends tells me that I'm not alone. I have support in the world. When I play with my grandchildren, I am filled with gratitude for all I've been given. My spirituality would not be possible without AA and the support of family and friends. And actually, the reason that I did decide to share my story with you today is because tomorrow is my 21st sobriety anniversary. So I'm, yeah. And I felt like this was some kind of a sign from my higher power. Okay, your church asks you to talk about God or the divine, and it's the day before your 25th anniversary. Yes, you should go for it. So, anyway, these days I pray, and I pray every day, but it's more like a gratitude list. I don't ask for things. I don't feel like God or the divine is there to grant wishes. Unfortunately, I mean, because, you know, we would wish for things that our friends don't have cancer, or that, you know, our team did win the game. But I think that prayer is meant to change me and my reaction to my circumstances. So what I do when I pray is I thank the divine for another day of sobriety. I thank the divine for another day of life. I thank the divine for the people in my life and the beauty of the world. I give myself the gifts of hope and generosity. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Shari, especially the vulnerability and courage that you've had to have, and thank you for sharing that today. And our third and final speaker is Laura Snow, who is a member of worship and also our president-elect, and also one of the leaders of our Covenant of UU Pagans group. And so I know Laura will have another perspective on experiences of the divine. Please welcome Laura.
Good morning. I was unchurched as a child. Our Sundays were a big breakfast, reading the funny papers, and just relaxing. So I grew up with no preconceived notions of what God was, is, could be, none of that. So it wasn't until later that, you know, started asking questions. I'd occasionally get invited to Bible, school during the summer. It was like, these are great stories, but what does that have to do with anything? And so I was left to seek and search and develop my own theology, my own understanding of what the divine might be. And just for clarification, my younger sister, who is a conservative Christian, was also raised in the same environment. And whereas I found it liberating and freeing, she was devastated that we had no Sunday structure that involved God. So same environment, different outcomes and experiences. So what is, to me, divinity and spirituality? Those are kind of loaded questions, loaded words in our society. And being an English major, I like words, and I like to have a foundational understanding of what those words mean. So divinity or the divine both have the connotation and denotation of being God. And in our culture specifically, being a Christian-based culture, it's just that. It means the Christian God. All other deities need not apply. What does spirituality mean? The best, most succinct definition that I found came from Dr. Maya Spencer of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, of all things. And she defines the word this way. Spirituality involves the recognition of a feeling or sense or belief that there is something greater than myself, something more to being human than sensory experience, and that the greater whole of which we are a part is cosmic or divine in nature. I think that's pretty succinct. The key phrase for me is "of which we are a part." This directly reflects our current seventh principle: respect for the interdependent web of life of which we are a part. This small phrase is not about separation of the self, but of connectedness to everything. And I want to note that the best definition I found for the word divinity comes from Merriam-Webster. Fudge made from whipped egg whites, sugar, and nuts. I like that. So how do I view spirituality and the divine? It is that deep in the bones feeling of being connected to all things in a nutshell. It's the unifying feeling of the mind, the heart, and the body, that sense of wholeness of the self, while at the same time sensing one's connectedness to everything else. That is the spiritual and the divine. They are one and the same to me. That sense of connectedness evolved from two different sources for me: stories and science. First of all, stories. I mean all stories. Legends, novels, history, particularly mythology, share themes and lessons across time and the globe. I include religious texts in the mythology category, and yes, this means the Bible too. The Bible is mythology, for me anyway. And for this, I must thank Joseph Campbell. I'd always enjoyed reading and learning from different books. Again, being unchurched, I was free to do that and question everything. And this is also why I'm a proponent of reading banned and challenged books. But reading his Power of Myth many, many years ago helped solidify that connectedness I was feeling from just reading stories. And for me, those stories that connected to my heart and being had to do with nature and the earth. So I started with reading indigenous mythology. And I connected to that more than with Greek and Egyptian and other mythologies that we may be familiar with. Because the indigenous mythology has such a connectedness to the earth. But it is also so culturally intertwined with their respective people that I could not claim it as my own spiritual connector. Now, the ancient Celts, on the other hand, also had a very deep connection to the earth, and they're from Europe, where my ancestors came from. And just to clarify, the Celts were an ancient Indo-European group that shared language and often customs that spread across most of Europe between 700 BC to about 100 AD, kind of tribal-like, and they eventually settled in the British Isles and Ireland. And that's probably where we get our most of our understanding of who the Celts were was from, we think, Irish Celtics, Irish Celts. And I read those mythologies, and there was some connection, but again, it felt like something was missing. My heritage is not from the British Isles. Primarily, it's from Scandinavia. And so when I started reading Scandinavian and Germanic myths, that's where it connected. This felt like home. Norse myths, and Germanic myths are very similar. It's like Greek and Romans in their similarities. They're complex. They're connected to nature and the earth in fascinating ways, and have that deep in the bones connection for me. This is spirituality by stories, connecting the heart and the mind to divine nature. And that's why I wore this shirt. Yggdrasil, the tree of knowledge in Norse mythology. So got all books on it. And there's the myth there of Odin hanging for 9 days from Yggdrasil to learn language and pass it on to people. The second spiritual connector for me, and more succinctly a connector to the divine for me, is science. And that sounds weird. Science grounds my body, my mind, and my heart in reality. This is the realm of the observable and the measurable. This is the realm of the senses. I've always loved learning about scientific hypotheses and theories. And while I did well enough in school with science, I just couldn't grasp the mathematics behind it. And I found out this is okay. It wasn't until I read Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time that I learned the understanding concepts in scientific fields didn't need a full understanding of mathematics. Who knew? I read parts of books from Carl Sagan and Brian Greene. Physics, it's fascinating, but boy, the math, I just can't get it. I watched the old and the new series Cosmos. Thank you, Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I gained new insight into how everything in the universe is connected. Then I had to cover chemistry class in school where I work. Combining what I had learned on my own and what I was learning, then teaching in school, the spiritual connection clicked. It's a joke. Why can you not trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Yes, our physical bodies are made up of the same atoms that make up the earth, the sun, and the stars. We are literally connected to Earth, to the cosmos by the matter, the very atoms that make up our bodies. This deep in the bones literal connectedness is a spirituality grounded in reality, uniting us in the divine interdependent web of existence. Finally, to quote Carl Sagan, the nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, the carbon in our apple pies were made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff, and divinely so.
Thank you, Laura. I didn't realize there was nitrogen in our DNA. Maybe that's why some of us are so explosive. Anyway, because of the time, Steve, I couldn't help myself. Because of the time, Steve, why don't you come up and lead us in our hymn, and we'll go right on. And reflections and questions with speakers during coffee hour.
I'm so glad I'm a part of this group. Stand if you're willing and able. We're going to sing the first 4 verses only. We won't sing the 5th verse. And Lizzie will play it through all the way as an introduction. So stand if you're willing and able. Where is our holy church? 113.
Our benediction today was also written by Adam Slate, called Sharing Our Blessings. We end our gathering with gratitude for camaraderie, shared wisdom, goodwill, and support that we extend to each other within this community. May we continue to bless each other with these gifts, and may we reflect those blessings back out into the world as we minister to those around us. Thank you.
When I was a boy, each week, Sunday we would go to church, pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word, consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad, miracles don't happen still. And now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. But now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. Used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Read questioning child's faith, say it's not a testament, that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament, tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. Used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy.